So when you and I say we're suffering from stress, we're never really suffering from stress. That's a myth. It's like a unicorn. What we're really struggling with are various problems in our life. And there can be many, many, many different kinds of problems that men and women encounter in life that are difficult for them or causing them angst or causing their physiology to be stirred up. But that's what stress is. So the first thing you have to do is you have to change your definition of stress.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Mort Orman. Welcome to the show, Mort.
Happy to be here, Nicky.
Good to have you. So, Mort, I just interviewed you on my business podcast, and I thought what you had to share was relevant and valuable to men. We're living in an era where men, manhood, masculinity, well, they're not what they once were. You know, a lot of men today are feeling lost. A lot of men today are not really feeling like society is on their side. But nonetheless, they're still men. They still need to go out there. They still need to go out and win at life. And one of the key things that a lot of men face in dealing with the trials and tribulations of life on a daily basis is stress and anger. And you happen to be an expert in helping people in general, but men for sure, deal with stress and anger. So let's talk a bit about this. Why, in your view, do men in particular deal with so much stress and anger in 2025?
Well, I think the problem is for both men and women, any gender, that we have tremendous misunderstandings about emotions and about stress in general within our whole society. So we don't have a good roadmap for understanding how to deal with these problems when they come up. And that's why we all have difficulties with it, why stress is challenging for everybody and why emotions are challenging for everybody. So I figured out about 40 years ago what was wrong with the way that we're taught to think about those two things. And I was very fortunate to have that sort of breakthrough in my own personal life because I was having a lot of anger and anxiety and relationship failures. And I was successful professionally as a physician in those younger years, but I wasn't feeling very successful personally because I kept bumping up against, these emotional problems, relationship problems, stress problems, and didn't really know how to solve them when I was used to solving major, serious problems as a doctor. You get trained to do that. So it was very frustrating and demoralizing that I would bump up against these problems that I couldn't figure out. And I eventually discovered that the reason I was having so much trouble was because I was given a bad roadmap, for understanding both of those areas. And so I finally figured out what the truth was about stress and emotions. And that really made a huge impact in my life. And I've been reaping the benefits of that ever since for the last 40 years.
Your story's a powerful one. And that's the reason I wanted you to come here to speak to men. But I really would like you to take a moment and just think this through. You're a very intelligent man. You are an observer of the world around you. Why do you think today, in this day and age, many men, especially younger men, are dealing with a lot more anger and stress than maybe they were 40 years ago? And then let's look at your solution to it, because I think that's an important thing for men to understand.
Yeah, well, I think you touched on the one of the main reasons is that society has changed. And men are not looked at in the same way as they were, when I was growing up as a kid. And when my father was being a man, in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, society for some reason has started viewing men negatively and viewing masculine traits negatively. When I'm not sure that was necessary, but it's a reality. It's the environment we're living in right now. And it puts a lot of extra burden on men because we're not really allowed to be ourselves. We're criticized and often penalized. for being who we are naturally, and that can be a big burden to carry.
100%. So, given that this is a reality that a lot of men face, what is your advice? What is your suggestion, especially to a young man, maybe a man, from his late teens to his mid 30s, on how to deal with this reality and how to deal with the anger and the stress that arise as a result of the world that he operates in?
Well, there are two particular problems. Let's break it into two problems: stress and anger. Okay.
Yep.
So to start off with stress, and in both of them, you have to realize the way you've been taught to think about them is what the problem is, and why you can't get out of the box, because you've been given bad ideas, bad understandings. So to start with stress, what I discovered 40 years ago is that stress is really just a word. It's not like a disease. It's not like a thing, although we conceptualize it that way. And we've been taught to think of it that way. It really is just a buzzword. It's a general term that some guy named Hans Selye invented in the 1930s. He was one of the first researchers, to do animal experiments around putting animals in cages and shocking them and discovering all the hormonal and physiologic changes in their bodies that happen. But he gave us this model of stress and this definition of stress that's really inaccurate. And he himself even acknowledged that stress is just a word. In the first book that he wrote for the public, early in the book, he says, "Listen, it's just a concept. It's not a thing. It's just we needed a word to do science and to do research." So when you understand that stress is just a word, you have to ask, well, what is it a word for? I mean, what's the reality? If stress is not real, what is the reality? And the reality is we use this word stress when we're having problems in life. And the problems often stir up our physiology and cause other problems in terms of health and fatigue and muscle aches and pains and headaches and GI upsets and stuff like that. But basically, our body's responding to problems that we're having. So when you and I say we're suffering from stress, we're never really suffering from stress. That's a myth. It's like a unicorn. All right. What we're really struggling with are various problems in our life. And there can be many, many, many different kinds of problems that men and women encounter in life that are difficult for them or causing them angst or causing their physiology to be stirred up. But that's what stress is. So the first thing you have to do is you have to change your definition of stress and realize it's just a word that stands for problems. And when you do that, it shifts your whole relationship, because you're no longer asking yourself, how do I deal with stress? Because that's like asking, how do I capture a unicorn? You can't. It's because it's a mythical being, right? You have the question you have to ask is, what are the stressful problems I'm having, and identify them specifically and get them out on the table and then deal with each one specifically. So one of those types of problems that fall under the umbrella of stress is anger and anger issues. Another is anxiety issues. Another is what we talked about how the society today has shifted in how they treat men. So that's a problem we now have to deal with, and it's causing difficulties, and it's real. The shift has occurred, and there are things that we can do to deal with it better or worse, but it's a problem, right? When COVID came, that was very stressful to a lot of people. Well, it caused problems, right? Lots of different problems. And it came out of the blue, when nobody was expecting it. So, and that's what happens in life. And we encounter hundreds and hundreds and thousands of different potential problems that you can put under this umbrella word called stress. But we're never suffering from stress. We're suffering from those problems. And you gotta change your focus, get it off of stress, and get it on to the problems. And when you do that, then now you're in the arena where you can really achieve some excellent results, because now you're focused on the actual problems you're having and not this thing you've been taught to believe in called stress, which you can't ever do much about. And it's frustrating to try to, because the only thing you can do with that is deal with the symptoms. So you can do stress management, you can do relaxation, you can drink alcohol, you can take drugs, prescription medication. These are all things. These are all things to deal with the symptoms of your problems in life, right? But when you take all of your problems and you put them in one basket and you call that basket stress, then you're kind of stuck at that point with just symptom relief. Okay. And you can get good at symptom relief, but it's only going to go that far. It's never going to really get rid of the problems, which is what most people really want. So that to do that, you got to let go of the idea of stress and change the word from stress to problems, and then start focusing on the specific problems you're having. One of which is anger, by the way. That is a big problem for most of us today.
Well, I really like how you broke that down. And men really like solving problems.
Yeah.
And one of the key thought leaders whose work I've studied, and actually I did a program that he put together, is a man named A. Justin Sterling. He just passed away in March. And he led an organization called the Sterling Institute of Relationship. And he led a program called the Sterling Men's Weekend and another one called the Sterling Women's Weekend. And one of the things he talked about is that men enjoy solving problems.
Yes.
So when you frame it as a problem to solve rather than stress, that actually plays to a man's strengths. And I'm wondering what your comments are about that.
Well, it does, but you look at it the other way. The reason why men have not been able to solve that problem called stress is because they've had the wrong definition or understanding of what the whole problem is to begin with.
They
so
didn't
when
look
you
at it as a problem, they looked at it as like a disease that they could do
yes,
nothing about.
yes,
Now,
which it's not.
when you look at it as a problem, as a man, you feel empowered because you're like, it's a problem. I just got to figure it out.
Well, it's not a problem; it's a group of problems. It's usually a bunch of problems, but each of those problems can be solved. If you focus. But if you're dealing with this umbrella term, you're thinking that that's your goal. Is how do I deal? The stress is my problem. Now you're down a tunnel where there's no cheese. Okay, or the only cheese there is symptom relief. There's no real resolution of the problem. So a man wants to solve a problem, but society. Another thing society has done is it's given us this bad definition of stress, which makes it almost impossible for most men and women to solve the damn problem called stress, because stress is not the problem. It's the other things that are going on in our lives that are the problem, what we need to be focused on. And the society has gotten us to focus away from that, which is problematic. And it keeps us from applying our normal problem-solving skills.
Well, the good news is looking at stress as a basket of problems is good for a man, because a man can wrap his head around finding a solution to a problem.
Yes.
Because whenever I go, okay, it's a problem, either I've got the skills to solve the problem, I can figure out the skills to solve the problem, or I can get expert help to solve the problem.
Absolutely. As long as you're focused on the actual problem.
If I look at something as a problem,
yeah,
then I feel that it's solvable.
Yes, and it is.
I look at something as outside of me, that like a disease or something I have no control over, it's less clear that it's solvable to me as a man. So I like this reframe. It's a
and one of the problems with stress is it has physical characteristics to it. So there is a stress response. It's been studied scientifically. There are hormonal changes and physiologic changes and things like that. So all that happens, and we've tended to define stress as those changes instead of realizing that those changes are the aftermath of the problems that we're experiencing. It's the problems that we should be putting the emphasis on. It's like when I do workshops and I make this point, I show people, I take a picture of a horse and I cut it in half, and I only show the back end of the horse. And I put it on the screen and I say, is this a horse? And most people go, of course not. It's only half of a horse. I said, yes, that's the point. When you're looking at the physiologic changes of stress, it's like looking at the back end of a horse and forgetting there's a front end. And the front end, what's driving those physiologic changes is all the problems we're having in life that we haven't figured out how to solve yet, partly because we're not focused on them as clearly as we need to be, because we're in this mythical world of stress where we're focused on a unicorn. And it keeps the problems in place.
So let's say a man is married or in a long-term relationship with a woman.
Yep.
And they're fighting, they're arguing.
Yep.
And he thinks, okay, this is stressful, man. This is stressing me out. So what would you say to that man? How would he need to approach this problem in order to solve it?
I would take the word stress away from him.
Okay.
Now tell me what your problems are. Well, the problem is I'm having marital conflict. The problem is, or maybe I'm angry, or maybe, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong in it. But a relationship, getting a relationship to succeed is a problem that we all face. Okay. And there are skills to apply. There are things you can do that help make it succeed, things that damage the relationship. And a lot of marriages, what's what happens. People get into them and they end up starting to damage the relationship, sometimes without even being consciously aware that the things they're doing are damaging. But they have the effect of damaging the relationship, and now they're stuck with problems in their relationship that they're trying to figure out how to deal with. If they call it stress, they're behind the eight ball right from the get-go. But if they say, okay, forget stress, I've got relationship issues I got to deal with. I got to learn about relationships. I got to learn about what's specifically going on in my relationship with my partner, where are those problems coming from? And then you can start to solve them. And one of those problems is probably anger, where there's a lot of anger flying around on both sides, that people don't have a good model for understanding anger. And so they can't solve that problem, and it continues to damage the relationship.
So let's talk about how to solve that anger. Like, let's say you have an argument with your wife, and you're both fighting and yelling and screaming at each other, and then you go off to neutral corners. So as a man that's going through that, how do you solve that problem?
Okay, again, you need to understand that you've been given bad information about anger. You don't have a good roadmap for understanding anger. I didn't. Back when I was in my 20s and 30s, all my relationships failed. I got angry at the drop of a dime, and I kept trying to fix it, and I couldn't. And the reason is I didn't have the right model of anger. I didn't have the right understanding of anger. And we think it's complicated. We think there's all these mysterious things going on, psychologically, where the anger's coming from, and emotions under emotions, and past traumas, and all that stuff. You can just throw all that stuff away. Emotions are very simple. They come from our brain, and they come from the way our brain makes us look at things. And our brain is a giant filtering machine. It's constantly filtering everything we see and experience 24/7. And we, as we grow up and as we have experiences in life, they determine the filters that we end up with. And we're always seeing filtered reality. We're never seeing reality as it actually happens. And our brains have discovered there are certain ways that they can make us look at things that will give us various emotions. So if you're angry, it's because your brain is telling you to look at things in three very specific ways. If you have anxiety, your brain's telling you to look at things in three different ways. If you have guilt, it's three different ways. So every emotion can be traced back to a couple simple filters that your brain is using that actually creates the emotion. I mean, the emotion comes from the hormones and the physiologic signals that get stimulated by the brain. But what's causing all that is you looking through filters and seeing the world in certain ways. Okay. So your partner, your wife, or your partner does something you don't like, and you're seeing that, and it's making you emotional. Let's say angry. Okay. Well, you're seeing it in a particular way to make you angry. Your brain knows how to do that, but most of us don't understand how our brains do it. They don't understand the formulas for the different emotions. So anger has a very simple formula, which I can share with your audience, and every man should write this down, because this will not only explain to you why you get angry when you get angry, but when your partner gets angry, or your kids get angry, or your boss gets angry, this will explain, because it's the same three filters in all human beings whenever they're angry about anything. Doesn't matter what the thing is they're angry about. So the three ways your brain makes you look at things to make you angry are: it tells you first that somebody did something bad, wrong, they shouldn't have done. That's the filter, first filter. Somebody did something bad, wrong, they shouldn't have done. The second filter is somebody was hurt or harmed or negatively impacted by the bad behavior. Could be you, could be somebody you care about, could be something you care about. So there was some negative impact from the bad behavior. And then the third filter is a filter of blame. But it's a very narrow, focused view of blame. It's very filtered. So you only look at the behavior of the other person, or the person who did the bad and wrong thing, and you don't see any other causes that might have been in play. even if they're real, and if they're there, your brain will cut them off and will only present you the ability to see what that person did or didn't do. And then that's when you have those three things line up together, when your brain tells you to look at things in those three ways, you get anger. So, for example, you're sitting at your computer one day and you've just done 2 hours of fantastic work and you're really proud of what you've done. And then all of a sudden your computer screen, goes blank. And you go, oh, and you feel like you want to punch the computer because now you maybe lost all of that work that you just did, right? But you had this immediate anger reaction that was automatic. Your brain just did it automatically, right? It told you the reason you got angry because your brain told you to look at that event in those three ways. Somebody did something bad, wrong they shouldn't have done. Well, your computer shouldn't have cut off like that, unexpectedly. It shouldn't have gone on the fritz. It shouldn't do that. Somebody was negatively impacted. Well, now you're negatively impacted. You may have lost your previous work. You can't continue to work until your computer comes back to life. So you've been negatively impacted. And who was to blame? Your computer was to blame. Okay? And when you look at things in those three ways, you're going to get the emotion of anger. Now, it's funny. I was giving that example to a gentleman that I was talking to, and he said, I had the same thing happen the other day. My computer just went out on me, just out of the blue, and I just got so furious I was going to just throw it out the window. And he said, and then I realized, I had disconnected the power cord and hadn't noticed it. And so the battery had run out. And he said, and I realized, it wasn't the computer to blame. It wasn't the computer's fault. It was my fault. But your brain doesn't let you see that in the moment it makes you angry. It cuts that out. But he realized it later on that when he recognized that the computer cable was disconnected from his computer, from his laptop. But it's a perfect example of the difference between the reality, what actually happened, which was he caused the problem, all right, and what his brain told him was that his computer was the bad guy, all right, and you should be angry at your computer because it did a horrible bad thing. All right. And that's how these things work. I remember my wife and I just celebrated our 41st wedding anniversary.
Congrats.
Which to me is like a miracle. If you knew me when I was in my 20s and 30s, you would know that's a miracle. Okay. Because I was destined to be just either single all my life or one divorce after another. Right. Because that's what all my relationships were like that. And I didn't understand anger at that time. But then I understood anger. I finally cured a lot of my anger problems before I met my wife. And fortunately, she never had a lot of anger problems in her life. So in our marriage, we don't argue a lot. We don't have fights. We never have. We have very little anger in our relationship. But there was this one thing that came up early in our relationship, this one unique circumstance where we would get angry at each other. And it was so uncharacteristic for us, it really stuck out. Okay. And it would only happen when we went on a car trip somewhere. And even weirder than that, it would never happen when we drove to our destination. We would never fight with each other when we were at our destination. It was only when we drove home. And this happened like 2 or 3 times. The first 2 or 3 times we went on car trips, and it happened each time. And it's like, it was so obvious. When you're fighting all the time, you don't notice one from another. But we weren't fighting at all. So this really jumped up on the radar screen. And it was the same pattern 3 times in a row. So I said, I got to look at this. And I used my knowledge of these 3 filters, how the brain makes you angry. And what would happen in this situation is I'd usually be driving home, and about somewhere along the trip, my wife would say, there's something over here that I really always wanted to go see, and it's only an hour off our path. Let's go do that. And I would go, no, we're not doing that. And then she would go, and she would react to my tone and my, negating her idea. And then she would get angry with me, and then I would respond and get angry with her, and we'd go back and forth like that. And I started to ask myself, okay, well, what's going on? Okay, so I'm obviously angry at her when she did that. So I got these 3 filters that made me angry. So the first one is somebody did something bad and wrong they shouldn't have done. Was I looking at her behavior through that filter? I went, yeah, I definitely think she did something bad and wrong she shouldn't have done. Now, let me ask myself, is that true? Did she really do something bad and wrong she shouldn't have done? I mean, that's how it felt to me. That's how it looked to me. But when I asked myself, is it true? I realized, well, technically, it's not really that she did anything bad and wrong. She just has a different way of wanting to drive home than I do. And it turns out in her family, that's the way they used to do it all the time. In my family, we were direct home drivers. We only stopped for food and gas and bathroom breaks. And it would be a sin to go off the direct path. So when she comes up and says, oh, let's go over here. And we didn't have any reason to be home early. We could just as easily go on where she wanted to go. But to me, it was like, no, that's a violation. You can't, that's not how you drive. That's not the right way to drive home. And my brain told me she was doing something bad and wrong. When I asked myself, I was like, wait a second. She's really not doing something bad and wrong. She's just doing it different. That's the reality. The reality is it was just different. My brain said it was bad and wrong. All right. And once I saw that, I said, oh, that's on me. Okay, that's me and my brain, ginning up this anger for no good reason, because she, it's no big deal. We could have easily gone over there. So from that point on, we never had that problem again. Because every time now we're going somewhere and she wants to go off the beaten path, I realize that it's wrong of me to judge her as committing a crime for wanting to do that. And part of my job as a husband is to give her what she wants whenever I can, and to help her have what she wants and be successful. So I'm going to say, sure, honey, let's go there. So there's no anger anymore for me. The problem is completely solved, eliminated. The anger's gone because I now see it accurately for what it actually is. A request to do something that's different than the way I would do it. And it's not a sin, it's not a crime, it's not a wrongdoing. Right? But I just share that example because it's very common. And B, it shines a light on how anger happens all the time. All the time, our brain is giving us these filters that are frequently inaccurate. At least one of them in the three, sometimes two, sometimes all three, are going to be inaccurate, and we don't know it. So we're kind of trapped in this false sense of reality that makes us angry. And it crops up all the time in relationships because there's so many things. Two people are usually so different upbringings, different filters, different ways of looking at things, feeling about things, thinking about things. And we're always going to be stepping on each other's toes and thinking the other one is doing something bad and wrong when it's actually just different than the way we do it. So this pattern crops up all the time in our relationships and causes lots of anger that's really not necessary. And when you understand how anger gets created, not only do you know why you react that way automatically, but you'll now know why your partner goes off and gets angry because they think you did something bad and wrong. They think you hurt and harm them or somebody they care about or something they care about. And they think you are totally responsible to blame and they didn't have anything to do with it, which in relationships is almost never the case. But that's how they're looking at it when they're angry. And that's how you're looking at your partner when you're angry, is that you didn't have anything to do with it. It was all on them. And usually none of those unilateral blame stories are true in a marriage or any other important relationship. So when you have the right roadmap for understanding where your anger comes from, and once I got those insights 40 years ago, I then had the cheat sheet or the code, to understand my brain and to take it on, and was making me angry. And I've been doing that ever since for 40 years now. And now to the point where I see things much more clearly now, so they don't get me angry to begin with. But even if I do get angry now, I can, I rarely stay angry more than 5 or 10 minutes because I go right to those 3 filters. I go, okay, I know why I'm angry. I may not know where the flaw is, and what my brain is telling me, but at least I know that's where my anger is coming from, and I know where to look now. I know how to solve the problem now is to figure out which of those 3 filters may be missing key information or key data or misrepresented what reality is. I got to find what reality is versus what my brain's telling me. And then the anger disappears when I'm successful at doing that. And that's a model you can start, people listening to this discussion can start using that model today. It's only 6 words you have to write down and remember. Bad, wrong, hurt, harm, unilateral blame. That's how human brains have been creating anger since the dawn of civilization and will continue to create anger for the next several thousand years.
So this is
And it's 100%. I've never, ever, and I've done this thousands of times. It's never not been those three filters. No matter what the external circumstances, I don't care what it is, how different, unique, individual it is. It's always, when you're angry about it, it's always those three filters that are making you angry.
So it's almost a solution to anger.
Well, it gives you the pathway to find the solution. The solution to anger is recognize the difference between what your brain's telling you and what's real, what's true. That's the solution. When you get in touch with, like in my case with my wife and the side trip, the solution was to get to the truth. The truth is she's not doing something wrong by asking to deviate off the straight path home. Okay? It's just a difference of preference and family tradition of how to do things. But one's not more right or wrong than the other. They're both valid. They're just different.
But it's a solution to anger. This methodology is a solution to anger, and this cheat sheet you talk about is a simple back of the napkin 3-step way to basically dissolve your anger almost in an acid of calm.
Well, it tells you how your brain is making you angry that you can't see. It's invisible. So you need a cheat sheet because you can't watch it. You can't see it in operation. But the cheat sheet tells you if you're angry, if you're truly angry, every time you're angry, it's going to be these three filters that you can't see. So you take out those 6, an index card or a sticky note, or you write it on your cell phone. You remind yourself, okay, here's how my brain just made me angry. It got me to look at things in these 3 ways. Yeah. All right. And now the solution process starts. Now I got to figure out if the 3 ways are true, if all 3 of them are true, or if one or more of them is false. And that's where you do the work. And now you got to interrogate your brain and argue with your brain, debate your brain, and try to see beyond your brain. Okay.
So it's almost like an anger analysis matrix. And then you use that to set yourself up to be able to.
Yeah, but notice how there's no complex psychological theories involved with this.
No, it's very
simple, and it'll get you to the goal line. If you use it, it'll get you there. And now it's telling that in today's society, the ability to tell the truth has been severely impaired. Everybody's telling this stuff to get us to not tell the truth, so you got to really, really dig deep inside and be really ruthlessly honest with yourself to get to the point where you can see the truth about different things when you're angry about them. Because one of the other tricks your brain uses about anger, it gives you these 3 filters, which are usually not true. Well, at least one of them is not true. And then it tells you that because of that, it gives you the feeling of anger. And then it tells you the feeling of anger means that you're right, that what you're seeing is correct. Mm-hmm. It's like in the Star Trek, was it the Klingons that had the cloaking device on their, spaceships, that you couldn't attack them because they put a big cloaking force field around their ships to protect them from, missiles. Well, that's what your brain does around anger. It creates the anger through falsehoods, and then it puts this cloaking device over it, which is, if you're angry, you must be right. So you'll never question or challenge your own, perceptions or your own thoughts and beliefs, which is the path, to freedom from anger. You got to be willing to do that. So you got to break through that cloaking device that your brain immediately throws up to get you to believe what it's telling you is true and not question it.
So your anger is not right, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's always false. I've been doing this for 40 years with lots and lots of different people, including myself. It's never been the case that there wasn't some kind of falsehood underneath anger, even anger that feels righteous. If you get deeply philosophical, you'll find that, there's something wrong with one of those 3 filters.
At the root of your anger is a lie.
Yeah.
That's a great way to end this particular episode, Mort.
And society will tell you, and your friends will tell you that the root of your anger is the truth.
Yeah, but society's full of crap.
Correct. That's the point of this. We started there and we ended there. It's full of crap about men, and it's full of crap about emotions, and it's full of crap about relationships. And that's why everybody has trouble solving these common problems, because you got to get out of that. You got to get out of that box that you've been put in, where you misunderstand what's going on.
We're going to make sure that we put your Amazon author page as a link in the notes so people can check out some of your books on this.
Okay.
Mort, I really enjoyed having you on both my shows. I learned a lot from each session. It was like a coaching session for me each time. So I thank you for that.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Happy to share with you and your audience. And because I think, this is the kind of stuff, this should be taught in middle school, high school. You certainly shouldn't graduate college without understanding relationships, without understanding stress, without understanding emotions.
And together for it, and approach Jordan Peterson for Peterson Academy.
Yeah,
The Anatomy of Anger. You should do that.
I'm one of his subscribers.
So am I. I'm doing my 4th course in the program right now. But why don't you pitch him on this?
I'd be happy to. Yeah.
You should. You totally should. Yeah. You totally should. It's a great idea. All right, Mort. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.